Hello, and welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be doing a weekly wrap-up, kind of more like a 2-week wrap-up for May, and I'm very excited about it. It's been so long since I've sat down to do a wrap-up of any kind. I still have to wrap up all of April, and it's very intimidating because I actually read quite a bit in April. I just, that was my escape for the last month of class. So I did not feel like filming any videos. I just wanted to veg out and read some good books, and boy did I. And it's going to be a lot of books to talk about. I feel like I'm going to have to do like a part 1 and part 2 since I didn't do any weekly wrap-ups. The monthly wrap-up is going to be so long, and it's just like, ugh. And some of the books I want to like really gush about. So here I am trying to avoid another April disaster. So for the month of April, the first book that I read is actually the second book in a series, and I haven't reviewed the first book in the series yet because it was in April. So I read The Solace of Sharp Claws, and I'm not going to try to pronounce this author's last name because I'm going to butcher it. It's Lana this. You just do that. So anyway, it's the second book in the Fae Guardians series. I really did like the first book, The Longing of Lone Wolves. It was part of my 12 Friends Challenge. Carrie recommended it to me. Lots of my friends have read it already, and I'm just late to the party. So I liked the first book a lot, and the hero in this one is actually related to the hero for the first one, and we definitely get a little bit of a, tease of who he's going to be with. In this world, it's kind of like post-apocalyptic. There's been basically nuclear warfare, and our hero is part of these Fae Guardians. They're different, races of Fae, and the Fae actually came about because it's like an evolution of humans and animal DNA that like mesh together, and that's how we get our Fae. But our heroines in this series are actually from the past. They have been basically frozen in like cryo sleep accidentally because of the nuclear warfare. And our first heroine, she woke up, and the second heroine for this book, Laura, she is one of the best friends of the heroine from book 1. And each of these female human characters, when they wake up 2,000 years later in this new world full of Fae, very confused about what's been going on, they also have some abilities. In the first book, I really liked how the heroine already had a psychic ability, and when she woke up it just felt very enhanced. And in this book, Laura, who didn't have any abilities beforehand, she actually wakes up with abilities like fire. And I did not like this one as much as the first one. I just felt like the first one had a very, very solid plot, and it was forced proximity. Everything about that situation, the characters that they were in, the building of the world, it was so good. But for this one, I didn't quite love it, and that's because I feel like at least, there was attraction in the first book, and it kind of built on itself, and I really felt like the characters got to know each other. In this book, it really starts off like as soon as he finds Laura, the mating mark appears on his arm, like very suddenly. So he knows right off the back, like this is his fated mate. This is very unusual in this world. So he's very annoyed by this. He doesn't want to have this human mate. He has lots of like daddy issues, abandonment issues. He detests humans for what they did to the earth and everything like that. So they start off on the back foot basically from the entire time. And I just don't think that their relationship developed very naturally. And I don't think that the adventure in this book, there was a goal. Thorne had this best friend. He's been missing for the past like 10 years, and the heroine from the first book has told Thorne, Laura is going to be the one to lead you to your friend. And that's the premise of the whole entire book. He just wants her to bring me to my friend. I want to go rescue him. I want to find out what's been happening to him. And she's just like trying to adjust to this new world, but it just didn't feel very natural. It didn't feel very organic. So I didn't really care for this one. I didn't get the chemistry with them. I gave this book 3.5 stars because I still enjoyed the world. I definitely am still interested in continuing with the series. I just hope that the next book has a more solid foundation for both the adventure part of the plot, because there is this overarching big bad out there, and for the relationship, the development, the chemistry. I just want it to be as good as book 1. The next book that I picked up was actually a fanfic. I've only ever read one fanfic in my life, and that's Manacled. It was so good. but also like is so draining after reading that one. And I had a couple that I had downloaded after Manacled. I just never got back into it. But recently fanfic TikToks have been migrating onto my For You page. So that's what led me to download The Disappearances of Draco Malfoy by Speechwriter. This one is I feel like it has a very similar voice to J.K. Rowling's like original Harry Potter series. Like it feels like it could be part of that series. It's just reimagined. It's reimagined. If you've never watched Harry Potter or you haven't finished the series, there's going to be obvious spoilers. Instead of Draco going through with trying to kill Dumbledore in the astronomy tower, he actually decides that he's not going to do it. Dumbledore convinces him that he wasn't, and he lowers his wand. Nobody interrupts them, and Dumbledore comes up with this plan to basically hide Draco. And he wants to make sure that his family will also be, swept into the fold. He wants them to go into hiding as well. So Draco starts off on a journey. Basically, he's not completely sold on the order. He just knew that he didn't want to follow through with killing Dumbledore. And I really, really, really love the character work that was done with Draco. And he basically is unwillingly pulled into the fold with the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And Hermione's the one who is the most welcoming to Draco. And I really love the internal thoughts for him. Like, it's so gradual the way that he starts to see things and he starts to change his tune. He's been indoctrinated his whole life by his parents and by everyone who surrounded them, and he's just starting to think differently, and he starts to go on this journey with them to find the Horcruxes. And the way that this author reimagines everything from the point of Dumbledore's death on, like we still get to the end point, we still get to the end game, we still go find the same Horcruxes, but the journey is so different, but so freaking cool. And the character work was so amazing. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but like Ron, something similar happens, and he decides to go home and not be part of the group anymore, and you don't see him for a very long time. And honestly, I was like, I don't care if Ron comes back at all onto the scene. I really don't care. I was like so into this developing relationship, friendship first. It was very slow burn, very slow burn, friends to lovers. Like enemies, reluctant allies, then friends, then lovers with Draco and Hermione. And also I would categorize this fanfic as more YA because there is, a sex scene, but it's very like distanced. It's very almost like there's a veil. You can't really see anything, but it's happening type of thing. So I will say that. Again, this is why it feels very true to like the original series. And but anyway, going back to Ron, we do get updated on what happened to Ron, and I will say I was not expecting much from him. I didn't really care about it, but oh my god, that was honestly one of the sneaky things that this author did so well, and I was just like, damn, I love it. I love what she did. Anyway, I thought this book was fucking phenomenal. I gave it 5 stars. Now going back to some regular books, next I picked up Forever Your Rogue by Erin Langston. This was recommended to me by Crystal. She was really, really loving this one, and I love finding new indie authors, indie historical romance authors. And the premise for this one is our heroine Cora, she is recently a widow. She has 2 young kids. We know that she's in a bind and her brother is helping her out with this plan, and we don't really know right off the bat like what's happening. We just know that she's writing to this man named Nate, or Nathaniel. Nate and Cora actually knew each other before Cora was married. They kind of had a little mini flirtation the summer before she got married, and Nate's reputation is of a scoundrel, a rake, a rogue. He has an older brother. Nate and his brother have a tumultuous relationship. The Earl is very like stoic, very about duty and honor and like do your part, and he is so fed up with Nate's behavior. He is in debt. He loves gambling. He loves women. He gets into fights, and he's like threatening to completely cut him off. So Nate's going to be in a little bit of a bind. And Cora's writing to Nate being like, hey, remember that favor that I did for you? Like, I'm calling it in. Like, I need you to come meet me. And he's just not answering her, but she's determined. She finally gets him into the room, and this is her proposal. She's like, okay, the thing about being a widow, it's great and all, but my husband, damn him, has stipulated that his sister, the husband's sister, is kind of like joint guardians with Cora. And the sister has just as much say in the children's upbringing as Cora herself does. They're like in charge of the estate part, and she's in charge of like the mothering and all that jazz. And the problem is the sister does not think that Cora is up to snuff, thinks that she is, you know, a terrible example. She's married to a vicar, whatever, pastor type of person, and she's just very snooty, and Cora can never do anything right, and she's kind of threatening to have both the kids come live with her, and Cora just has like visitation rights basically, and so she's like, this cannot happen. She keeps saying, you know, since I'm unmarried or whatever, and the kids need a father figure, and that's why they need to come live with her, so I need to get engaged. And my brother, who her brother is a barrister, is working on trying to overturn the will and to have Cora just be the guardian for like everything, and him as well to manage the estate for her son. So her proposal to Nate is that they have a fake engagement, and in return she's going to settle a large sum on him to settle his debts because she knows about the debts. Nate is like, this is so ridiculous, and she's like, what other choice do you have? So eventually Nate goes along with it. It's supposed to just be for a week where he has to really truly pretend, and he goes to visit Cora at her estate while the sister-in-law and her husband are visiting. And then I love how invested Nate gets in there, and I think that that's one of the brilliant parts that this author like really pays attention to, is that Nate is literally so reluctant in all of this. He doesn't want to do this. He's just like, I'm fine. I don't want to be anyone's fake boyfriend at all, and like I don't know about this. And he gets there and he can't help but get invested in Cora and the kids. And when I say that this man just surprises me so much in how amazing he is with the kids. Like, he's still his kind of like boyish rapscallion like personality. Like, he never like turns into like just a totally different person. He's still himself. He's still a jokester, but oh my god, the way that he and the kids interact is just so good. And there's this one scene, it's kind of a spoiler, so I'll put a mini spoiler, but they go to this garden party and they're still pretending to be engaged, and the little girl, Tess, is afraid of dogs, and he was out with the men. They were hunting. He was very bored, and all the women were at the house, and like the kids are playing in the garden, and all the hunting dogs are going towards the people. And there is a gate, and the little boy, who's, you know, the son of the people who own the estate, he lets the dogs in, and Nate is like, oh my god, like, hey, go get your dogs. And he's like, oh no, they're fine, they love kids. And Nate's like, no, my daughter is afraid of dogs. And he runs to her and like he calls her his daughter, and I was just like, stop. Anyway, I really loved it. I really did love it. I thought it was phenomenal. Chef's kiss, perfect. Love, 5 stars. The next 2 books I'm not going to go into great detail or give my star rating just because these are my Patreon picks. So they have an exclusive vlog that they get to watch, and I wait a little while before I really talk about any of my thoughts. One of them, you're definitely going to know that I at least liked it because I ended up by going and read the rest of the series, which I'll talk about those. I feel like it's very funny that I'm just not going to really talk about the first one. So the first one is Here With Me by Samantha Young. I've only ever read one book by Samantha Young. That was on Dublin Street. I really didn't like it. It was 3 stars. Like, it just was not, didn't do anything for me, right? So I never picked up another. I'll lie. I read one more book by her. I'm such a liar. I totally forgot that she had a book that she published a couple years ago. It has like a yellow cover. What is it called? And it's like a girl, and she like takes time off, and then she goes lives in Scotland for a little while. Like, all the books, I guess, are set in Scotland because she's Scottish. But anyway, I read 2 books by Samantha Young. I actually liked that other one, the arc that I cannot remember the name of. That's so sad, but very true to character for me. I actually like that one better. Anyway, so this book is about the Adair family. The Adair family are very well known in their neck of the woods in Scotland. The oldest brother, Lachlan Adair, has been a Hollywood actor in the past, but he's since retired. And they turned their family's like ancestral home into basically kind of like a bed and breakfast for the rich and famous. And our heroine, Robin, I absolutely love the complexities of Robin and what she struggled with and how it brings her to this castle in Scotland. So the first chapter is actually 1 year ago in Robin's point of view. She is a cop and she's with her partner, and they're just like sitting, chatting, they're BFFs or whatever, and then they get a call for like a domestic violence, like report for domestic violence, and they go in there, and Robin ends up by taking a bullet for her friend. She gets shot and she almost dies. Then we have our time jump for a year later, and so like I'm already like super invested with this first chapter. A year later, she's approaching this castle, and she's trying to be let in, and she's letting them know, she's like, let Mac know that his daughter is here, and everybody's kind of like shocked. Well, it turns out that Robin's father was 15, I think, when he got the mom pregnant. He pretended to be older because he looked older. And so they don't have much of an age gap. I mean, it does not look like Mac is old enough to have a 30-year-old daughter, Robin. And they have been estranged. She hasn't seen him since she was 14, and she definitely has lots of resentment built up with Mac because she feels abandoned. But, you know, she's turning over a new leaf. She decided to start a photography business, and it's really taken off for Instagram, and so she just wanted an excuse to go to Scotland and maybe sort of settle things with Mac. Like, just, she wants to hash it out with him. The problem is, so she resents Lachlan, because Lachlan, when he was a Hollywood star, he hired Mac. Mac was a police officer as well, and hired him for his personal security, and she blames Lachlan for the main reason why Mac has never, like, been there for her since she was in her teenage years, and just completely abandoned her. So she already hates Lachlan, and Lachlan despises Robin because Lachlan's like, I know stuff you don't know, and like, if you're coming over here to like mess with Mac's head and like put the blame on him, then I'm not having this. This is my best friend. I think that this book was very enjoyable, and I won't tell you my rating yet, but I liked it enough to pick up book 2. Before I get to that, the other Patreon pick was In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. I did not read Love Light Farms. I did pick it up in December, and I will say this was very true for both Love Light Farms and In the Weeds. I don't really think that B.K. Borison, in my opinion, has a very strong opening to either of her books, because Love Light Farms, it's not like I DNF'd it. I started it, but I was also like reading multiple books at the same time, and I literally like just never went back to Love Light Farms. I forgot about it. I was just like, it did not occur to me to go back into Love Light Farms. I just was not pulled in, drawn into the characters or whatever. In the Weeds, I felt very similarly about this. I listened to the audiobook on Anyplay, and I think that that definitely helped push me past that point, because I just don't feel like there was a really great opening. It was a flashback scene for the hero and the heroine. They had like a one-night stand, a hookup, and then they end up like months down the line seeing each other at the Love Light Farms place or whatever. And like, I could not get into the chemistry of these characters at first, but it did end up by getting better. And yeah, it was really cute. It was a really cute story. Again, will not give my rating out yet, but I will talk about it later in my monthly wrap up whenever I eventually do that. So moving back to the Adair family, the next book, There With You, is about Robin's younger half-sister, Reagan, and they also have some family drama going on with them. Robin feels very abandoned by Reagan after she got shot. Like, Reagan has disappeared off the earth, and there's just lots of drama with the mom as well. There's lots of good family drama, I will say, with Robin and Reagan and all their family dynamics. I really like that. So Reagan just shows up at the end of book 1. She's like, surprise, I'm here. And she, of course, has a secret that she's not, you know, revealing to Robin. Oh, and I forgot to say, for Here With Me has a little bit of a romantic suspense quality to it. All these books do. And I will be saying something about that since I'm going to be talking about every single book in the series. You will notice that each book that I read, the ratings start to get lower and lower. It's not because I can't connect with the characters. I think that all the characters were very well developed. I think Samantha Young did a really good job of, you know, building the chemistry between the characters. That wasn't the problem. And a couple of other books have some elements besides this plot thing that I'm about to talk about that also kind of lowered the rating for me. But the main reason why the ratings kept getting lower and lower is that Samantha Young used the exact same conflict in every single one of the books. It was so repetitive. It was ridiculous. And it was even more ridiculous because most of the conflicts involve a mentally unstable person who has become a stalker and a killer. So it was just like quite amazing that all 5 siblings in this family were in the crosshairs of a stalker slash killer. It was just crazy. I was like, come on, can we have like something else going on? No, same thing. And I also found this really interesting. I think it was at the end of book 2 in the acknowledgements, or book 3. Samantha Young thanks Catherine Cowles for, being a, sounding board for ideas, whatever. And I find that really funny because one of the critiques that I have about Catherine Cowles, I felt very similarly for her series. I never finished the series that I had started. The ratings got lower and the same conflict happened in that entire series. So I was like, interesting that you guys are friends because you both do a similar thing with your series where it's just very copy paste but with different characters. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, going back to Reagan. So Reagan is not telling Robin what's going on. She needs a job, and Thane, who is Lachlan's younger brother, he is a widower and he has 2 kids and he needs a nanny. He reluctantly hires Reagan. Of course, everything that he's heard about Reagan is that she's flighty, she's not reliable, but Reagan has nannied in the past. She does have experience, and I absolutely love the way that Reagan and the kids interact. Like, it's just, the kids were the cutest. I love the kids so much. Liam, he's the older boy, and he's a little bit quiet, a little bit more serious, but he takes to Reagan, like, very well. And then I might be butchering the daughter's name, Ailey. She is so freaking cute. Her nickname is Ailes, and I love her. She has like this monster voice that she does sometimes, and I laugh every single time that Samantha Young writes Ailey. She's just amazing, and I love her. So this is a forbidden nanny romance, forced proximity. She is living with Thane, but it's kind of like in a guest house. And age gap, all these books have an age gap. I don't know if I mentioned that already. And I loved it. Now, there was a couple of things that kind of detracted, and it was mostly to do with like the push and pull between Reagan and Thane, but it was still very enjoyable. I gave this book 4.25 stars. Always use the next one, and this is Mac, which is Robin's father, and Arrow, which is the only girl of the Adair family. And they have had something brewing in the background. Like, we've noticed it from book 1. We see more in book 2. And so I was like very, very interested in Mac and Arrow. I will say I was a little bit disappointed in how the book starts off because they have had a falling out since book 2. Like, they've had a falling out. Mac has, pushed Arrow away like one too many times. And this last example where she misinterprets, but she doesn't really misinterpret. Mac is just very determined to not be with Arrow for his own reasons that we explore. And I will say that there was a pretty good representation for therapy in this book with Mac, because he does have past traumas that he has to deal with, and lots of just low self-esteem issues. And I really like the way that that's represented in here. But I will say that I just absolutely hated how forced it felt for Mac to push Arrow away this hard. I wish Samantha Young didn't go so hard with Mac and pushing Arrow away. I thought it was it didn't make as much sense compared to like what she was doing with those characters in the previous books. Like, I felt like we were building like steadily towards maybe a secret relationship, whatever. And instead, it just like has already exploded from the beginning of this book, and they have to find a way back to each other. So it wasn't as enjoyable as I thought it would be, but it ended up by being really cute, and I'm very glad that Mac gets an HEA. So I gave this one 3.75. Again, very repetitive conflict in the end. Very repetitive. It's so repetitive. Be With Me. I think that maybe Be With Me might be the most forgettable of the books. I think that it feels that way mostly because Aaron, this younger sibling, he has been absent for a lot of the previous books. He just comes back in Always You. So we don't know him as much. I don't feel like Samantha Young did as much like character work with Aaron in the background. And he's finally returned home, and the heroine Aradine, we know that there's definitely some traumatic stuff in her past that she's hiding. Lachlan and Mac won't talk about it. 8 years ago, they brought her to Scotland, and she's very shy, very timid, and she's the yoga instructor for classes on the estate. Aaron is just very flirty, and this is like a friends to lovers type of romance, and it's just very soft, very sweet. Again, samey conflict. It just got very repetitive. I gave this one 3.25 stars. And then the last book in the series, Only You, we definitely have been building up to Broden, who is also a Hollywood actor from book 1, because he's kind of been going off the rails in Hollywood. Lachlan's very worried about him. And in the previous book, we find out that Broden's ex-best friend, Monroe, they were best friends since they were like 5 years old. And we know we might have been privy to it in Always You with Mac and Arrow, but we know that Aaron slept with Monroe and Broden freaked the fuck out, even though that Broden and Monroe were not dating, they were just best friends. Freaked out, and he has not seen Monroe for the past 18 years at all. So she has returned. She had like moved away and stuff. She's returned. She's now a school teacher, and we get to see the kids again. She's Liam's school teacher. She's 30. They're both 37, Broden and Monroe. There's no age gap for this one. I think this is the only one that doesn't have an age gap. I think Aaron and Aradine, they do have a little bit of an age gap. Now this one, I find that the characters have a lot of chemistry. I definitely think that their story is more memorable than Aaron and Aradine's was, but Broden is such a dick to Monroe. When he returns home and he sees Monroe out in public, she's trying to be friendly. Like, you can tell she's embarrassed. We've already gone through this with the previous book. Whenever she runs into Aaron, she feels very embarrassed, and Aaron's just like, I want her to know, you know, we could still be friends. Like, I don't want her to feel uncomfortable. Like, none of my family holds ill will, except for Broden, towards Monroe. Anyway, so like she is also, everyone in the series has had a traumatic past. And hers is to do with an abusive father who's an alcoholic, and now her mother is emotionally abusive to her as well. And the reason why she returned is her mom had hip surgery, so she's taken a job at the elementary school. And when Broden sees her out in public, he like gives her basically the cut direct. Like, he ignores the fuck out of her. And then when there's kind of like a forced proximity situation because Liam asks Broden, who's a Hollywood megastar, to direct his Christmas play, or their winter play or whatever, and he reluctantly agrees. And Monroe's also there trying to help with the play. Like, he's straight up a fucking dick to her. He's mean to her, and he says very heinous things to her. And I'm just like, again, Samantha Young, you went a little bit too hard with this Broden hating Monroe thing. And even after we find out, like, why was he a dick? Why did he feel so strongly that Monroe deserved this vitriol from him? Like, I could kind of see it, but no, I don't think that it was a good enough excuse. But when they actually do kind of like get onto like common ground, whenever they figure out what went wrong back then and why their wires were crossed and stuff like that, their chemistry was really good. But again, one of the conflicts, internal conflicts with Broden, was so similar to what Lachlan was struggling with, and this was book 1. It was like a repeat of the internalized fears of Lachlan repeated in Broden. So I was like, did we just run out of ideas? So again, this book wasn't, I gave it 3.25 stars again because I was just like, I feel like the story was a lot more memorable than Aaron, but like, Broden is my least favorite brother because of the way that he treated Monroe. But it all worked out in the end, I guess. Anyway, I really enjoyed this family, the Adair family, and Samantha Young, she's so good at setting up like the next couple in a series because Broden has a bodyguard, and there is a new American girl who's working on the estate, and she's a single mom and she's a baker, and that stuff was going on in the background. I'm like, even though I know that the conflict is probably going to be so similar to what the conflict was in the Adairs, I'm probably going to read this book because I want them to get their HEA. But it's going to be so samey. So samey. So I'm predicting the book about the bodyguard and the single mom, which is, I guess, the start of like a new series. Because she said, Samantha Young, in one of her acknowledgements, said that she's not ready to leave this estate, this area of Scotland. So I think she plans on writing more. I'm going to read it, but it's probably going to be in like the 3 to 4 star range just because of the repetitiveness. I can't stand it. Like, I need something different, you know? But also, the character work is very good. Samantha Young knows how to write some good chemistry. Okay, so this brings me to the next one. Fourth Wing. I am going to be on a live show. I think it's May 24th. Hold on, before I say something that isn't true. Yes, it's Wednesday, May 24th on Christy's channel. We're going to be talking about Fourth Wing, like go in depth, with Carrie, Christy, Crystal, Jess from Honest Fiction, and Lacey. So we're all going to be on that live on May 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So this was one of the books that I actually, in my video, if you watched my anticipated reads for 2023, Fourth Wing was on it. I just stumbled upon the, synopsis for Fourth Wing, and I was like, yes, dragons, love dragons. I was very into discovering some more fantasy this year. So I liked the synopsis. I was very intrigued. It almost was giving me vibes just because it was like, oh, we're going to go to this college for dragon riders. I was like, oh, maybe some like Kingmaker vibes, maybe, but with fantasy and dragons. definitely here for it. Very excited about it. I pre-ordered the hardback because I wanted to get the version with the sprayed edges, and I was just over the moon. So I started reading Fourth Wing. I kind of was reading the hard copy, but I really needed an audiobook just because it was like my graduation week. So I was like back and forth with school, with practice, with pinning, with all these ceremonies, and I was like, I have to listen to the audio. Christy thankfully told us that the audio was available on NetGalley, and I ended up by getting it. So I listened to the audio, and I will like come out right at the gate. I'm sure you've heard it before already. The first 30% of the audiobook is terrible quality. The narrator is either sick, or the editing portion of this, narration was just terrible in the first 30%, or a combination of both. But there's a lot of background noise, a lot of like swallowing, sniffs, kind of like she sounds sick. She does sound sick, and that was bad. And I was just like, I'm very surprised that they let that be in the final version of this audio. It's just, I don't know, there's been a lot of money being put behind the marketing for this series, so it was just very surprising. I don't recommend the audio if you're an audiobook lover, but I don't count that against the book. That's literally production quality. It's not the book's fault. So didn't like the narrator at all. I don't recommend that. And I will give some general thoughts because I can go into greater detail whenever we're on the live show and we're talking about it, but I didn't enjoy this book. And I don't even want to say what I was expecting because I really feel like I had minimal expectations. I wanted to have a good time, and I just didn't have a good time. There's a lot of elements that really just did not let me get pulled into this story, did not let me feel emotionally attached to the characters, and I just had lots and lots and lots of issues. One of the main ones is that I feel like this is written, even though it's marketed as new adult, the characters are in their 20s. I think Violet, our heroine, Sorrengail, she is 20 years old, and Xaden, the hero, is a couple years older than her. I feel like it was written young. Like the tone of the book feels very, very, like it's very catered towards a younger audience. And this could definitely, in my opinion, be classified as YA if it did not have so much emphasis on like casual sex. Like there's just random, talking about like, oh, who did you sleep with last night in the morning, and like orgasms and whatever. There's just a lot of that. I think that this was marketed as new adult, but also written for younger audiences as well, to kind of get the best of both worlds, because TikTok is very obsessed, and Reels on Instagram, very obsessed with like marketing books based on spice level. And so we need the sex scenes so that people can say like, oh, it's a spicy dragon romance book, but also just it feels very young. It could have been YA if the sex was removed or like referenced vaguely instead of explicitly. And I don't like reading YA romances. I only like rereading YA romances that I've read in the past whenever I was a YA reader, but I just prefer more mature feeling characters. That's just my personal preference. So that was a detractor for me right off the bat. And one of the other big issues that I have with this book is I don't think that the world was developed very well. I needed a reason from the beginning to know why dragon riders mattered, and why going to this college, being forced to go through this brutal initiation to even become a dragon rider, why does this matter? Why do we have dragon riders? Like, it wasn't explained from the beginning like what the purpose of this was. One of the comparisons that I felt right off the bat, like I had the text from Crystal that I sent to her. She had started reading it already, and I think she was 30% in. She was just like, let me know whenever you start it. I was 3 chapters in, and my text to her, I'll put it up right here actually. I was like, this feels very Divergent-y. That's my initial impression. After a couple of chapters in, it feels very Divergent-y, but I'm neutral about it. Like, let's just see where it goes. I don't know if it's going to continue to feel like it, but that's my initial feelings from this book. Like, first thoughts, Divergent. And it was, guys. Like, I'm telling you, this author was just like, let me make it Divergent, but with dragons. We have our different, factions. It's the riders, and then the healers, and the scribes. Violet, our heroine, was initially thinking that she was going into the scribe faction. Her father was a scribe. He has passed away, but her mom is like high up in the military and is basically forcing Violet to be a writer, because she's like, Sorrengails will be writers and that's it. The problem is Violet has like a chronic illness, I guess you would say. Like, she was sick whenever she was young, and it made her very fragile. She's easily bruised, and whenever she breaks bones or like gets like injured joints, they take an abnormally long time to heal. But her mom's still insistent that she's going to be a dragon rider because that's what Sorengales are. I feel like a lot of characters, especially characters like the mom, like other similar characters, they're very like caricature-y. Violet goes along with it because she's like, my mom's gonna force me to be in it. Like, I can try to get out of it, I can try to go with the scribes, but my mom's literally, she's so single-minded, she's just gonna force me back in. And so like, she has to go along with it. She has an older sister, Mira, who is a dragon rider, and that's basically the first scene of this book, is Violet overhearing a conversation with the older sister berating the mom for forcing Violet to going into the dragon rider. So we're very immediately thrust into this kind of like initiation ceremony that it takes to even be considered I don't know if it's like a candidate, it's not cadet, I can't remember. You're like a candidate to be a dragon rider, but like you really are a dragon rider if a dragon actually picks you. Like, you still have to go through, like, jump through hoops before you even get to the point where a dragon could potentially pick you. So the first, again, very divergenty. The first thing that she has to do is basically walk across this very skinny, almost like balance beam between buildings, and she has to make it across. That's your first thing that you have to do. A death-defying stunt, just like Dauntless in Divergent. And then we meet, you know, just regular caricature-y evil people who just want to kill her because she's a Sorengale and she's weak. So yeah, that's Violet's character. I personally feel like I would have felt more affinity to Violet if we understood her first before she was just thrust into this world. And I also feel like Rebecca Yarros, I feel like I'm going way more in depth than I plan to do in this video. I was like, save it for the live show, but I have so much to say. And I don't want to take away other people's time during the live show just to get my point across. So maybe I will just say my thoughts. But I felt like if we understood Violet's character a little bit more and how being prepared to be a scribe was actually an advantage for someone who is not physically strong, like going into this faction with the trials preceding becoming a dragon rider, like how is being a scribe going to help her? I feel like if we had just a little time before we forced her into that initiation ceremony, because it was very fast-paced, her sister's like, here's a special armor that I had made for you so that you will hopefully survive, and here's some tips about it, and like, go. And it was just very like, woo, let's get into the dragon college school, like quickly, because we need to. I feel like if we took a little bit of time just to get to know Violet as a person, maybe get a little bit of history in like, what is this country, this people, what are they fighting for? Because we just know that there are wars, and that's why we need dragon riders, because dragon riders are on the front lines fighting this war. Like, what is the purpose of it? What's the history? Like, what I need a little bit to go on to care about, like, why, what's so great about becoming a dragon rider? You're just revered because you have a dragon, but like, why are we at war? Who are we at war with? What are they fighting for? Why? Don't know why. I don't feel like there was much subtlety to like the themes that Rebecca Yarros was inserting into this book. Very heavy emphasis on Violet being the protagonist that is an underdog and everyone underestimates her, and she's physically weak in a world that, especially for the dragon riders themselves, because none of the other factions really have an issue with Violet being physically weak. It's specifically the dragon riders. They're like, only the strong survive, weed out the weak, kill them all type of mentality. And like, it's very like, she perseveres despite that because she is strong in other ways. And I don't feel like there was enough subtlety to that. And also there wasn't a lot of convincing evidence to Violet's character being a person that could actually survive in this world. Like, actually, could she survive in this world? Probably not. And this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but this is like something that I just feel like it would have made her character so much more empowered on her own merit, instead of, I feel like Violet's character is empowered, but it's mostly externally. There's one thing that she has in her arsenal that was underutilized, and I just don't feel like it was very well incorporated into her character, and that's because she knows plants and how to make some poisons. I like her being able to do that. I just wish that it felt more integrated into her character, and I don't know, it just didn't feel, it felt just like a cop-out for her to be able to survive some of these combat scenes, and it just wasn't utilized very well in my opinion. But one of the, like, I feel like it would have been so much better In the beginning, her sister Mira, is that what her name? Her sister Mira, who's already Dragon Rider, had enough time, because it felt like in the beginning that Mira had just discovered that the mom was forcing Violet to be in this faction, but also yet she had enough time to wait for her own dragon to go through a couple of molting cycles so that she could collect some scales that fall off the dragon when they molt. Gross sounding, and then find somebody to shrink the scale so that they're very minuscule, and then make this specialized armor for Violet so that whenever people try to sneak attack her, she has this dragon armor underneath her uniform. So that to me is unbelievable, that Mira had enough time and forethought to be able to create this armor when it felt like she was just being made aware of Violet being forced into the faction. So to me, that's a little bit of a plot hole, but how cool would it have been if Violet herself, by nature of being trained as a scribe, figured out on her own, because this dragon scale armor is a new invention. Later on in the book, Mira says that she tells like her superior, and the superior's like, wow, that's a good idea. We should make some armor and put it on our people. Why did Violet not come out with this idea? That is self-empowerment. That is taking, her life and protecting it and using her skills as a scribe, being trained as a scribe, something that's not like brute strength, that's using that to her advantage, and it makes her feel like such a more badass character whenever she's able to do some stuff for herself that's not based in physical strength, but it's based in smarts. I just feel like her character was totally mishandled. I just don't feel the badassery coming off from her. I don't. And then there's the romance. So the romance, I don't feel like it was well developed either, because we have a very not well developed history between Violet and Xaden. Xaden is the son of somebody who was executed by her mother for a rebellion. That again, we're kind of info dumped, like, oh, he's a child of the rebellion. What were they rebelling against? Like, I want to know that before. And I just don't feel like it was well done. Anyway, we're supposed to believe that Xaden hates her. We're supposed to believe that. And Violet repeatedly tells you, like, oh my God, he's going to kill me at any opportunity. Her sister warns her about that. Every time she sees him, he's like, oh God, he wants to kill me. Is it going to be now? He's got me alone. The problem is, from the very first, this man has not made a move to harm her in any way. He could have endangered her life. He could have made her life a living hell, because he's the leader of the fourth wing, which is what she gets put into, because he's like a third year. Could have made her life a living hell, but he chooses not to. Like, he kind of protects her the whole time. And so, like, that wasn't convincing to me. I got very tired of the conversation between them, where she's just like, if you're going to kill me, do it now. And he doesn't ever. And she just like, oh, he still wants to kill me. I'm like, you don't use your brain? I don't know. Then we have her relationship with Dane. So Dane is somebody who she was best friends with. He's a second year, and she kind of had a crush on Dane. And she was kind of hoping, after he was done with all his training and she was done with her scribe training, that maybe something could happen between them. Dane is just a character. He's just there so that the reader can see the comparison between, and it's not really even a love triangle. Violet thinks that she likes Dane, but the person who really is in her corner is Xaden, because Dane always questions her, they have the same conversation the whole book, where he's trying to force her to defect and go to the scribes. And she keeps saying, I can't. My mom is just going to put me back in here. Like, it's so useless to even try to go to the scribes. And Dane just like, no, I'm so worried about you. I know that you're going to get hurt. And then she starts to get aggravated because she's like, I'm surviving. I am surviving. So like, stop underestimating me. He is explicitly there to underestimate her, be the comparison in which we look at Xaden compared to Dane, thinks her a lot more capable and is like trying to empower her. Another scene, the first time that Violet fights Xaden, it was unplanned. He immediately starts giving her tips while they're fighting in combat. And like, people can die during this combat training. And he immediately starts giving her tips. And she still is convinced that this man wants to kill her. And I'm just like, why would he want to give you tips? It's just crazy. Anyway, I have some more things to say, especially about like the dragons. I feel like a lot of this stuff was very predictable, but I don't feel like the dragons felt like they had enough menace, or they were supposed to be these powerful creatures. Like from the very moment when she actually crosses her little, balance beam bridge, and they line them all up and a couple of dragons come to like stare them down. Some of the kids, well, they're not kids. Some of the 20-year-olds get so afraid by just having a dragon in front of them that they turn tail and run, and the dragons just poop, smite them. Okay, burn them to a crispy crisp. So like we're supposed to believe that dragons are so dangerous, and that they're very discerning with who they choose as their riders, So like for me, dragons were supposed to be built up to be these creatures who are kind of like not all knowing, but they know a lot more than humans and very powerful. And when she does eventually get bonded with her dragon, I just don't feel like the relationship between rider and dragon is very well balanced. And I think it's mostly to do with the tone of the book. It feels very young, but it also feels very contemporary. That's another problem that I have with the book, was that it feels too contemporary for me. I wish the fantasy was a little bit more leaning towards like the high fantasy spectrum of things rather than the low fantasy. This just felt very modern. Lots of modern elements to this book, but dragons are there. So I do wish that this leaned more heavily into like straight fantasy. And I really don't even understand the purpose of having the setting for book 1 be a college. It makes it feel more like boarding school YA than anything. Like even if it was just like when you're initiated into the riders and you just have to live at these barracks, like make it feel more military than it did like boarding school type of thing, I think that would have worked better. I mean, I don't know. I could not be connected with this book in any way. There's another thing about Xaden. Okay, I'll put a little spoiler. Another thing that I feel like points to the fact that Xaden never, ever felt like he wanted to kill Violet. And it's because of the very last scene of this book, we discover that Violet's brother is not in fact dead, that he is alive, and he's been living in Xaden's like city that, got destroyed after his father was executed for being a traitor, but they've secretly been rebuilding it, and apparently her brother's been there the whole time. So like for years, Xaden has known the brother is on their side, on the rebellion side. Why would he hate Violet? He has no reason to. None at all. Which reinforces my feelings of this is such a cop-out. This is such a forced enemies to lovers because they don't even feel like enemies. It's just a big pet peeve of mine when authors write a story that they claim to be like enemies to lovers, but like it really, they don't do enough groundwork. They don't do enough to truly make me feel like these characters hate each other and they have to work towards an understanding and then team up and then eventually fall in love. And also they fall in love too quickly. I know I'm all over the place, but like, Violet goes from being, this man wants to kill me, but he's so hot. Oh, damn, why is he so hot? Oh, we're in combat training. He's about to kill me. But damn, he's between my legs and rubbing up against me. And God, it's so hot. Why do I think he's hot? He hates me. And then they sleep together. And then she's like, I'm in love with you. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Crazy to me. So none of this worked for me. I didn't like it. But a lot of people did. A lot of people, everything worked for them. They were satisfied with dragons. They were satisfied with their relationship. It was very exciting for them. And that is the opinion of others and not me. I mean, it's just, I didn't connect with this book and I will not be reading further in this series, which is unfortunate. I will be, giving away this copy of Fourth Wing because I just don't, it's not something that I want to have on my shelves. I don't feel attached to it. So I'd rather give to somebody who likes it and wants to continue with the series. I don't think I said my rating. I gave this 2.5 stars because I feel like if I enjoyed it in any capacity, it would be more in the 3-star range, but I didn't. My messages to Crystal were a little sassy, I will say. I was very frustrated, and it comes from a place of being frustrated because I see the potential. I was hoping that it would be better. I had, high hopes that this was going to be a series that was going to be like the new fantasy that I loved, and it wasn't. So it was feelings of frustration that led to some sassy comments about how bad I thought that this book was. But anyway, I hope that I explained myself enough. I know I jumped around a lot, but I hope I explained myself in the reasons why I had that this didn't work for me. Okay, only 2 more books. The next book that I picked up was Soft Flannel Hank by Eliza MacArthur. So this book I heard about from Crystal as well. She was like, Charlie Swan gets an HEA, and I'm like, what? Love Charlie Swan. Listen, Twilight was definitely in my era. I'm 30 years old. Twilight was huge whenever I was in high school. Everyone was reading it. You know, the books were coming out during that time. Then the movies came out. We went to all the midnight premieres. One of my favorite things about those movies, they're not great, but some great things about those movies are Charlie Swan. The actor is so good. Charlie Swan is the best thing from those movies. Like, chef's kiss. He is perfect. And Soft Flannel Hank is so freaking adorable. So our hero is Hank Dove, like Charlie Swan. And our heroine is actually a witch. She is on the run and she comes to this small town. And I think originally the author did have this town being Forks, but she changed it to World's End so that it wasn't like complete fan fiction, but there are so many nods to Twilight that it is very much thinly veiled fan fiction, but I still enjoyed it. So Esther's on the run, and she and Hank have one of the most beautiful like first meetings. And also what I think about, like, this is the thing, I'm not against instant attractive feelings, but it needs to be developed in a believable way. Hank and Esther do have like a one-night stand at the very beginning of this book. It felt so realistic, and I felt like the chemistry was off the charts with Hank and Esther. It was very well written. This author does have a way with words, I will say, and that sucked me in from the very beginning. And Hank is actually, he has self-esteem issues, very low self-esteem, has similar history to Charlie. He was married and it didn't work out. He has a daughter, doesn't really see her anymore, and he just feels very alone and he's depressed. He's a retired cop now. He quit his job, and he just kind of a little bit directionless. And so when Esther sweeps in, he doesn't know that she's a witch, and she is unaware that he knows about the supernatural elements of the world. So they're just having a conversation. They just catch eyes across the room in a diner and have a conversation, and then one thing leads to another, and it's very like a very soft, lovely, like warm and fuzzy type of book. I will say that there was a little bit too much hot and cold that went on in the relationship. There was multiple instances where misunderstanding kind of led one or the other character. Each one had their own moment to shine in this situation, where they would just be like, oh, I think they don't like me or whatever, so I'm just gonna take a drastic action and like remove myself, no explanation, just like boom. And there was a little bit too much of that for this for it to be like an amazing read for me, but it was still very beautiful. I gave this book 4 stars. It was a fun time for sure. And lastly, I read another fanfic, and it's Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. I think that's the title. These long ass titles, man, for the fanfics. I loved the premise for this one. Hermione and Draco are 30 years old. Hermione is a doctor, regular doctor. She's also a healer. She does research, and she needs protection from the Auror's office. Somebody is after her research. It's very secretive. Nobody knows what it is, but it's on a needs-to-know basis, and only Kingsley Shacklebolt knows what Hermione is researching. They need it on the hush-hush, and they need her to have a bodyguard. Draco ends up by being the Auror in charge of Hermione. So lots of forced proximity situations, and it's, again, a slow burn. I'm really loving these slow burn fanfics, like so good. And I think I want some more slow burn regular romances too. Like, I don't know, the slow burn is just doing it for me. This felt much more like an enemies to lovers, enemies to like reluctant friends, and like we tolerate each other, and then like the feelings are so good. Like, I just love it. The writing is not as good as Speechwriter, who wrote the other fanfic that I talked about earlier. I felt like it was a little bit too modern, which, I mean, they're 30 years old, so it would be like in the early 2010s, I guess. So there is supposed to be some modernness, but I just don't feel like a lot of things that Draco and Hermione said, I don't think that they would say it. Like, I don't know. It just felt a little bit too crude. I think it was too crude. Like, I don't know. Some of the things that they said, I was just like, Jesus, you know? But I had a really great time, and the chemistry was so well developed. So slow burn. I think the first kiss is like 74%, and this is a long fanfic. So if you're not into slow burns, you're not gonna like this one. But it was so good. I loved it. The ending was beautiful. The last chapter, delicious. It was really great. So I'm gonna give this one, I know people probably are very annoyed with me for all the quarter stars, but I feel like it helps me so much in explaining like this book was good but not as great as this one. And I think I'm gonna give this one 4.25 stars because it's not just a 4-star, but it's not like in the 4.5 star rounded up to a 5-star range, because I think that there's a vast difference in writing quality from the Disappearances of Draco Malfoy in this book. I just feel like that the other one was far superior in every way, writing wise. But character wise, like this one was just as good, just as satisfying. 4.25 stars sounds really great to me. So that is the end to my, I guess, bi-weekly wrap up for May. I'm very excited to be able to have time for more videos. I'm gonna gird my loins and try to get an April wrap up together and hopefully condense my thoughts. I'm a long-winded speaker when it comes to reviewing books, so we'll see how that works out. If I feel like I'm talking for too long, like I've already talked way too long for just a 2-week wrap up, I might split it into 2 parts, so we'll see about that. But thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified of any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.